So there was an article in the New York Times. Obviously, the New York Times likes to whitewash stuff, but even they can't help but report on this stuff now. About how they got like secret documents revealing that in like the first month or two of the Gaza genocide, the Israeli military gave like an express order that they could kill like one presumed Hamas supporter for 20 civilians. In some cases, up to 100 civilians. Now, the New York Times sort of took this at face value, very much so. Hold on, let me bring up like the de-paywalled article. All right, so article title: Israel loosens its rules to bomb Hamas fighters, killing many more civilians. Surprised by October 7th. You notice the language here, that this basically takes everything that Israel does at their word and tries to like present their perspective as like the main one that you should be paying attention to. So it's surprised by October 7th and fearful of another attack, like trying to rationalize this. Israel weakens safeguards meant to protect non-combatants, allowing officers to endanger up to 20 people in each airstrike. One of the deadliest bombardments of the 21st century followed. So the actual news here is Israel issued extermination order saying that a combatant to civilian death ratio of 1 to 20 was okay. That's the real framing here. Particularly because what Israel claims to be a combatant is not a combatant, okay? Israel targets journalists. Israel targets like random people like from the political wing of Hamas. Israel targets like government workers, like, you know, a bureaucrat or whatever. Israel will target someone who was like in a photo with someone who was like tangentially linked to Hamas once. Israel's idea of what constitutes a combatant is so broad that they can justify killing anyone to themselves and as many civilians as they want around them to themselves. That is the real framing of this article, how it should actually be framed. Now, the article, of course, tries to justify it by quoting the Israelis presenting their perspective. Well, what do you expect us to do after our prisoners broke out and attacked us? Of course, we're going to kill 20 civilians for every one random guy who we claim is Hamas while providing no proof. Now, there is a complementary report released by people way less bad, Air Wars, who looked at the actual evidence for people who died in October 2023 in Gaza and confirm the ratio of people for whom there is any actual evidence of them being militants with civilian casualties. In 606 mass bombings, in which 522 civilians died, only between 32 and 60 militants could be identified, or 32 like actually identified and 60 possible. For 32 there is clear evidence, for 60 there is maybe like the Israelis claiming as such, but you can't trust them. Every single one of these was an attack specifically on a residential building. Now, this sort of ratio, these sort of like 1 to 20, like people have been saying like Loner Box, those Destiny, those sorts of people, they've been saying like, well, it can't be a genocide. Where's the order from the Israelis? It's not a genocide, regardless of how obvious you can infer that it is from what they're actually doing, until you get like a specific written order from them to kill civilians. And well, there's a specific written order from them saying they can kill 20 civilians for every combatant. So what now? What you going to move on to? And then we have an actual analysis of the people who were killed that shows that the ratio was not even 20 to 1, okay? It would be far more logical to assume that Israel was targeting civilians and accidentally killing some people who were associated with Hamas in the process. That is way more likely. It's also clear, by the way, totally clear, ever since, I made my video on Gaza death toll denial a couple of months ago. But if we look at the graph of the official death toll, it is clear at this point that the reporting capacity has for a very long time, honestly, a year now, possibly longer. It breached 40,000 in August, and this goes up to November, and it's at like 43,000. There is no fucking way. There's no way. This is not due to the Israelis killing less people. It's because the reporting capacity has been completely destroyed. Not to mention that official counts are always a massive underestimate. At this point, 200,000 would be a low estimate to make. And you'll notice that a lot of the people who previously denied the death toll entirely have moved on to claiming that the death toll is the only reliable thing. Like people who were like, oh, it's the Hamas Ministry of Health, the Hamas death toll. Now, you can't make estimates based like the same sort of estimates that those people would accept in any other situation. You can't do that. Like the Syrian civil war death toll figures, by the way, they're basically entirely made up. There's not like a list of names or anything to go along with them. They accept those, no problem, even though they're estimates. We shouldn't need this much evidence, obviously, because these are things that you can conclude just by looking at what they're doing. Inferences you can make in any situation like this where people are just being fucking massacred en masse like this. Civilians, obviously, being massacred en masse like this. One, there is a clear order from the Israeli military authorizing them to kill 20 civilians in one fucking strike, up to 100 in some cases. The military telling them, kill as many people as you want, basically. We're okay with it. 2. Clear evidence from actual analysis of the people who have died, showing that there is little to no evidence for any significant number of combatants among them. Something that was already obvious given the lopsided ratio of women and children relative to other conflicts, given that in other conflicts, usually among civilians, men are like 60-70% of the dead. 3. Given the complete breakdown in reporting capacity and the like almost flatlining of the death toll, it's clear that the death toll is so much higher than it's actually being reported. Yet denial continues. You think like those sorts of people like Lone Heroics, Destiny, those sorts are ever going to fucking cover these reports? They're just going to ignore it completely. So yeah, I mean, what more is there to say? The evidence is piling the fuck up. It was already obvious though, a year ago, more than a year ago. At this point, anyone who is continuing to defend this shit is doing it because they support it, nothing else.